sometimes before you can build high, you've got to clean up first. You've got to clean up messes before you can build things that are new.
This podcast is brought to you by Blackaby Ministries International. To find out more, visit blackaby.org.
Welcome to the Richard Blackaby Leadership Podcast. My name is Sam Camp, and I'm your host, and I'm joined by Richard Blackaby.
Good to be with you once again, Sam.
Always a pleasure, Richard. And I'll remind our listeners that you will be at the Cove next year.
Yeah.
Sign up for that will be forthcoming. We'll have a registration links. Hopefully by the time you're listening to this, we should have something in the show notes for you to click on and register.
We always encourage people. It fills up, which we're really gratified for, but then you can still attend, but you can't stay on site.
Yeah.
And especially if you've never been there before, you really want that experience of being where you just walk from your room. They're very nice rooms, and walk over to the dining room or walk over to the auditorium and get frozen yogurt, take it back to your room, or sit out on the deck and look on the Blue Ridge Mountains.
Yeah.
It's very nice. So
it's a great place, a great space to be in, and it'll be the inaugural address of Experiencing God 2.0.
Yeah.
Or the next chapter.
Yeah.
However we want to describe the sequel.
Yeah, and it we're still just developing it, writing it, but it's not to replace Experiencing God, but it's to fill in some gaps and emphasize some things that perhaps weren't emphasized in the original, and so to kind of complete it out a bit more. So it's not like we're redoing it, the old one. It's like, okay, what got missed? What, after hearing all these people share and ask questions, where do we address some things that didn't get addressed in the original? So pretty excited about that.
Yeah, so be on the lookout for more details to come. But we are going to continue in Nehemiah. Chapter 4. This is part 7, if you're keeping track. And we'll see how many parts we end up with here, Richard.
Yeah, we'll probably go through to about chapter 6. The wall will be finished at that point. So,
but that's not helpful for the listener because though that is 2 chapters away.
Yeah, I don't want to give any false hopes here.
Who's to say how many more episodes that will take to get us there?
I'm not making any promises about that.
Exactly.
Well, we just got into chapter 4 the last time we were looking at Nehemiah. And of course, after this rallying cry that Nehemiah challenges everybody to man the walls and let's repair and let's get rid of the ruins, and people rise to the occasion. And of course, it's been over 140 years that those walls have been lying in ruins. And as we've seen before, it often just takes one leader that, with a positive encouragement, can turn the tide, and churches that have declined for years suddenly start to grow again. Mm-hmm. Businesses that have not been profitable for years suddenly come up with new products and new service, and so often it's just amazing what one leader can do. A different coach of a sporting team, and all of a sudden this losing team is a contender again, and it's just amazing to me. And that's part of what just fascinates me with leadership is the difference even one person can make. And so he comes in and they start building, but then the criticisms and the threats and the lies start coming. And this has bewildered many, many leaders over the years. They were doing a good thing. They were serving God. They were making the world a better place. And then it absolutely blew them away when people began to say ugly things about them. A pastor came, and this church had been in decline for 25 years. You'd think that people would just be thrilled that they were starting to reach new people, and people in the community were starting to come, and attendance was up. But then they got bushwhacked because the wrong kind of people were coming to the church, or the people were starting to lose control of the church because the numbers were growing once again. And so you shouldn't be surprised as a leader when you are doing what God called you to do, and then attacks come. And so it tells us in the beginning of verse 1 that Sanballat began to mock, and he was furious. And we kind of left it there last time. Why would people get mad when you are experiencing success. Why would people be angry when you're doing God's work? Well, unless you're serving a different power other than God. And there are powers and forces of wickedness and evil that truly hate messengers of light, people that are serving God. And because you'll at times be bewildered to say, like, why does this person hate me? I took a huge cut in pay to come lead this organization, and it's hasn't been successful in years, and now we're having more success we've ever had. Why would they be mad at me? But there are people that truly are invested in the destruction of God's work, not its prosperity. And so Sanballat is he mocks them. He asks, "What are these pathetic Jews doing? Can they restore it by themselves?" And then Tobiah jumps in as well, and he's mocking them as well. And we saw just kind of at the end of our last time that that's often the first line of attack is talk. Words are usually the first missiles that are fired. Mm-hmm. They may get to other things. Maybe they'll get to lawsuits or a scandal or trying to force you out or vote of confidence or something else. But typically it's going to start with words, and you're going to have skin that's thick enough to handle the mocking, the ridicule, the deliberate misrepresentation. And I'll tell you, for some people, especially pastors, that's very hard to take, where you are laying it all out there for God and the people, and then there's just some. And I'll tell you, one thing I appreciate about Nehemiah is that I've known a number of pastors that were run off their church, and typically, I would say almost every solitary time, it's never been the majority of the people that ran them off. It was typically a handful, mm-hmm. but they were very vocal, ugly, loud minority, and the pastors just couldn't stop listening to those voices. Yeah. And so you get this minority that is beginning to speak loudly and threaten and mock and just try to get under Nehemiah's skin. And, one of the worst things that happens with that is you take your eyes off of what your eyes should be on. Nehemiah is there because God called him to be there. Nehemiah can look around and see this wall in ruins and know that's why I'm here, to get this thing built. But if you start looking at your critics, start listening to them, as soon as you get your eye off the ball, then you're in danger. And so, a lot of times the reason people use words is because all they have to do is cause you to lose your focus. Now you're obsessed with what people are saying about you on social media, what people are whispering about you in the back halls, and now you're not at your best anymore. And so that's their attack on Nehemiah. And so then you get to verse 4, and I find this very interesting. Nehemiah just breaks into prayer. And one of the things you notice about Nehemiah is he's very practical. Like he's not coming in to preach a series of revival meetings. He's not introducing new worship liturgy. He's building a wall, basically, which will have all kinds of ramifications, but it's very practical. Just construct a wall and defend yourself against possible enemy attack. But this very practical person is also, he also prays more than just about any leader that we find in the Bible. And they're not long prayers. There might be a sentence prayer, but he prays, in a sense, he sort of personifies what Paul talked about when he said, pray without ceasing. And what I think Paul meant by that was, you don't just pray in the morning during your quiet time. You pray while you're at work. You pray while you're commuting. You pray as you're about to go into a meeting. And it doesn't have to be a long, extended intercession. You can just be lifting up a one-sentence request, but it's just constantly acknowledging your dependence upon God. And so in verse 4, he just says, listen, our God, for we are despised. Make their insults return on their own heads, and let them be taken as plunder to a land of captivity. Do not cover their guilt, or let their sin be erased from your sight, because they have angered the builders. And so, pretty heartfelt, honest prayer. God, don't Don't let them get away with this. Don't just forgive them and let them just carry on business as usual. And part of what Nehemiah, I think, is saying is, I'm not taking this personally. These are enemies of God. The reason that they hate me and they hate what I'm doing is because they hate God. And so what he's really saying is, it's not that they hurt my feelings, God, so strike them dead with lightning bolts. Nehemiah is saying, I've discovered where your enemies are, God, because as soon as I started doing your work, now they hate me. And so, and I tell you, especially a spiritual leader, you have to recognize the difference. Is this a personal attack? Does this person just truly hate me? Or is it they hate Christians? They hate people that follow God, that have integrity, that won't cheat like they do, that won't compromise like they want to. And so he lifts up this prayer. And then I love what it says, then verse 6, so we rebuilt the wall until the entire wall was joined together up to half its height. And so I like that. You have in two verses, it's on one verse 5, he prays, and then verse 6, so we rebuilt the wall. And so anyone who says, well, prayer, if you can't do anything else, then you can pray. And the idea is, prayer is pretty well useless. So if you can't get a trowel out and lay brick and put a wall together, if you can't fight with a sword, then you can pray. But what you find with Nehemiah is the most active people that you'll find. The people who get more done than anybody else are the people that are praying. Now, he doesn't have a period of prayer and fasting. He prays as he works. He prays as he supervises. He's working and praying at the same time. And I think it's just a false dichotomy to feel like you just do one or the other. I work. I've heard husbands say that. I earn the income my wife prays. It's like, well, don't tell your wife that. But it's not a dichotomy there. It's you do both. You pray and you work at the same time. And I think genuine prayer will cause you to work harder than anybody else because you've talked with God. You know what's at stake. And so they build it to half the height. And I think it's interesting that they even point that out. You'd think, and Sam, like for me, I like closure. I like things done. Mm-hmm. I don't know that it's a big point of celebrating that you're half done. But he points that out. And I think it is important. It doesn't give us a lot of details here, except that he acknowledges when they got to the halfway point. And I think that would have been important for these folks. If it's been 140 years and they haven't even gotten to point A, for them to get halfway there is worthy of kind of pointing that out. And Nehemiah is not saying we've arrived. He's just saying, look, we've made progress. We're not standing still. And there's a lot to be said about celebrating small wins. Don't wait till the whole job is done before you start acknowledging people and expressing gratitude and even celebrating. You don't want to celebrate prematurely, but I think celebrating a key milestone along the way never hurts. Yeah. Don't celebrate as if the work's done. But there is sometimes, I think, especially longer projects, I think it's okay to kind of break it down. It's kind of like eating an elephant. You don't necessarily wait till you've eaten the last bite. You sort of celebrate along the way and acknowledge we're halfway through. That's a milestone. And then it just says one other thing that's interesting. It says, for the people had the will to keep working. And that's a fascinating little statement to me, because for 140 years, the people apparently didn't have the will to work at all. And now they have a will to keep working even when enemies are threatening and criticizing and mocking them. And there is a way, I think, sometimes to turn that to your advantage. Sometimes people's criticisms can actually demoralize you, or you don't have the heart to work anymore. But I think a wise leader finds ways of using that even as fuel for inspiration. To say, no one thinks we can do this. No one thinks we can turn this around. No one thinks we can get back on our feet after that setback. But I believe in you, and I believe God wants us to do this. And so He says that people had a will to work, and that is one of the key roles of leaders, is helping foster that will to work. If when a leader tells me I just can't get anybody under my care to do anything, well, that's probably more of a reflection of the leader than the worker. That means that under your leadership, nobody had a will to work. And it is possible for leaders to actually demotivate people, where they, and of course, if you mishandle people, if you let people slack off and not work, then it's going to demotivate the ones who would work hard. Or you tolerate casual sort of attitudes, or lackadaisical effort, or sloppy work. Well, it's hard for people to stay motivated to strive for excellence if it's okay to not be excellent. And or some people routinely come in late all the time without any ramification. Then it's pretty hard on the people that were meticulous about always getting there on time. So there's lots of ways where if you're not careful, you can actually demotivate people to work. Like, why should I work? That guy doesn't work and he gets paid the same as me. I remember years ago working for a lawn mowing company in Texas, and it would get 110 degrees out, and you'd be out there with a push mower. And I remember this one guy was a football player. He was the biggest guy that I'd ever worked with, just all muscle, but he was a baby. He was just a wimpy guy. And he was always drinking all these power drinks and taking vitamins. But I mean, as soon as the sun came out, he was overwhelmed and had to sit under a tree in the shade while I was going up and down the line mowing the grass. And I'm thinking to myself, that guy's going to get the same paycheck I am, and he's sitting under a tree drinking a Gatorade, and I'm still pushing this lawnmower out in the heat. That can be demotivating.
Yeah.
But Nehemiah said, no, even with the opposition, once they got working, once they started to see progress, they had a will to keep on working. And I just think that's a tribute to his leadership. But then verse 7 says, when Sanballat, Tobiah, and the Arabs, Ammonites, and Ashdodites heard that the repair to the walls of Jerusalem were progressing and that the gaps were being closed, they became furious. And so again, the enemies of God are angry at the progress of God's people. So verse 8 says, they all plotted together to come and fight against Jerusalem and throw it into confusion. So we prayed to our God and stationed a guard. And I love verse 9. That's a perfect summary of prayer and action. It says, we prayed to God, but we posted a guard. Yeah. You might say, well, if you prayed for God's protection, why did you post a guard? Well, because maybe that was God's answer. Maybe that is God's provision, is he gave you guards. He gave you armor. He gave you some people that would be attentive to the security. Prayer doesn't mean you don't set a guard. It means you recognize, God, there's only so much we can. We'll do what we can do. But that may well not be enough unless you fill in the gaps. You bless our guards. You keep them awake. And so what I found in the Christian life, it's rarely either or. We don't need to post a guard. We prayed. Or we don't need to pray. We've got a guard. No, you need to do both. So pray, but also set a guard. Be diligent, and so all these enemies are convening together, and their plan is let's do destruction. And again, I would not say that you don't take threats seriously, but again, I would just say from my own experience, there's lots of things that people talk about doing that they never do.
Yeah.
And I've had lots of people threaten lawsuits over the years that didn't end up ever getting an attorney, and people threatening all kinds of things. Well,
now with social media, it's so much easier to threaten and not follow through.
Yeah. And of course, and so you want to be astute, because there'll be some people who will follow through. But I would just say, not everybody does. And so, and if you set a guard, they're less likely to. And so again, when their response is, first they ridicule, then they talk big about what they're going to do, how they're going to attack. Now, you can't be careless. You can't just ignore that. But at the same time, as a leader, if you've had any experience at all, you realize you have to be prepared. But not every danger, not every perceived threat comes to pass. So we'll be prepared, but I also won't be surprised if it doesn't actually happen. And so it says they all plot together. And so he says, so we prayed to our God. So this is his second prayer in 8 verses. Or 9 verses. So Nehemiah is working hard and he's praying hard. And that's usually a good combination when you put the two together.
Yeah.
And so he says, we prayed to our God, we stationed a guard because of them day and night. And don't miss that too. He didn't just station them in the daytime. It probably wouldn't be that hard to get people willing to be guards in the daytime. Like, probably a better job than hauling big blocks of rock around and putting it back in place. But guards at night, when everyone else is going home to bed, that's a little bit different. But if you don't have guards around the clock, it doesn't matter if you had guards from 9 to 5. And I've just found sometimes, leaders can be diligent at certain things, but then leave big gaps where they're not prepared. They're diligent here, but then they're careless over there. And often the enemy figures out, well, where are they being careless? And so night and day, he's got guards posted. And verse 10 says, in Judah it was said, the strength of the laborer fails, since there is so much rubble. We will never be able to rebuild the wall. And so it is kind of interesting that Nehemiah is kind of quoting a common saying that people had at the time. There's just so much rubble. We just will never. You can imagine. You can't even walk around. Try to imagine rebuilding a wall, but everywhere you step, there's large rocks strewn all about, and dangerous, sharp objects, and broken and burnt wood from the burnt gates and so on, and just you could never get just a clear space to assemble walls and get people working and moving around. And we mentioned this before, but I'll just highlight it again, that sometimes before you can build high, you've got to clean up first. You've got to clean up messes before you can build things that are new. And I've seen many times where leaders neglected that. They came to a church, they wanted to just immediately launch into some new outreach programs, but they had all kinds of dysfunction on their leadership team and all kinds of unhealthy practices that were embedded in the church programming. And they didn't want to clean anything up. They just wanted to add something new. But of course, if the foundation is jeopardized, you don't want to keep building high when you've got all kinds of weakened foundations and lower stories that need to be fixed first. And so I think some people, it'd be fun, if you build up the wall and it's up to 6 feet at the end of the day, well, that would be fun to see that. But you spend a whole week just cleaning up debris. What do you do? How do you celebrate how many garbage bags of junk and garbage you collected over the week? It's just not as much fun. But a key part to building up is cleaning up. And so this was some of the complaints was, well, there's just so much garbage here, so much junk, so much brokenness. And it just seemed like it never ends. There's just always more. And anyone who's ever done any church revitalization and trying to turn organizations around that have become very unhealthy, you can feel the same way. You can just feel like, every time I open another closet, I just find there's more garbage in here, more skeletons that have to be cleaned out. And will this ever end? I've known many a leader who said it was far worse than I had first thought.
Right.
I started snooping around. I realized, boy, this rot, these problems are just far more extensive than I could have imagined. And so verse 11 says, and our enemies said, they won't realize it until we're among them and can kill them and stop the work. When the Jews who lived nearby arrived, they said to us time and again, everywhere you turn, they attack us. So I stationed people behind the lowest sections of the wall at the vulnerable areas. I stationed them by families with their swords, spears, and bows. And again, this is just strategic. Where do you put the guards? Where do you put? You don't have enough soldiers to put them all along the wall. You have to be strategic about where you put your defense, and so you put the defense at the most vulnerable places. And I would say to a lot of leaders, for your organization, do you even know where the vulnerable places are? Who are the weak links in your chain there, in your staff? What are the processes in your organization that are most likely for the whole chain to come off and things to start spinning out of control? And if there is an attack of the enemy, where would you be most vulnerable? Well, that's obviously where you want to post your guards. And so, but I think for a lot of leaders, they don't necessarily even know their organization well enough to know. And sometimes you can't necessarily know at the outset, but if you're paying attention, you can start to notice where's the friction coming, where are the problems that seem to be generating the most. Who is it, and what are the issues that seem to keep coming to the surface? I better lean in there, because what could just be an irritating problem right now, things can really get out of control quickly if you neglect those. So he puts the people by family, and so again we saw this with the building of the wall. He has people build the wall across from where their house is, and so here he has people in families defending the wall. So you've got your two sons with you, you've got your brother-in-law with you. Well, you're way more likely to fight fiercely and not sleep on duty if you know that your family will be killed if you're not alert and attentive and doing your best. And so he does everything he can to motivate people to be their very best. And then he just says to them, don't be afraid of them. Remember the great and awe-inspiring Lord, and fight for your countrymen, your sons and daughters, your wives and your homes. And basically just says, don't be afraid. And that's one of the messages that leaders have to give. I know that, we could be attacked. These people hate us. And so we have to post a guard and we have to be ready. But don't be afraid, because even if they attack, God is with us. And we'll pick this up next week, but he's going to review with them the fact that God has proven that he's with them, that he's guiding them and protecting them. And there's just something about a leader inspiring courage in people. And of course, you can't give to others what you don't have yourself. So if you're not courageous, you're not going to help others be courageous. But the image you get of Nehemiah is he's circling the wall, he's stopping and encouraging folks, and lots of people I'm sure have got questions like, Nehemiah, do you think they'll attack? Do you think they'll follow through? Do you think we're in danger? If they attack, how many do you think they'll have? Do you think there's enough of us to repel their assault? And I'm sure he's just going around just very calmly letting people know, you don't need to be afraid. We've got this under control. We are prepared for the worst case scenario that might happen. And that just helps people relax and just keep working. Sometimes I've known organizations got hijacked by their problems, and sometimes they were potential problems. They weren't even real problems. They were just potentially this could happen. And they lost their focus, and they got completely obsessed with what might happen, and they failed to get the job done that they needed to do. So Nehemiah is circling about, speaking courage. He's letting groups defend parts of the wall together, his families, his friends. And so even when the enemies rage against them, the work keeps on going. And so just some great leadership skills demonstrated by Nehemiah. And we'll pick that up next week.
All right. Sounds good.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. If this is something you enjoyed, it really makes a difference if you leave a review and a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. Don't forget to subscribe and share with your friends. We always love hearing from our listeners, so email us at podcast@blackaby.org.